Chapter 12, Part 2. We don't have time to read the entire book, Violet said, any more than we have time to search the entire arboretum. If we fail, Sunny said, her voice heavy with fungus, at least we die reading together. The Baudelaire orphans nodded grimly and embraced one another. Like most people, the children had occasionally been in a curious and somewhat morbid mood and had spent a few moments wondering about the circumstances of their own deaths. Although, since that unhappy day on Briny Beach when Mr. Poe had first informed them about the terrible fire, the children had spent so much time trying to avoid their own deaths that they preferred not to think about it in their time off. Most people do not choose their final circumstances, of course, and if the Baudelaires had been given the choice, they would have liked to live to a very old age, which for all I know they may be doing. But if the three children had to perish while they were still three children, then perishing in one another's company while reading words written long ago by their mother and father was much better than many things they could imagine. And so the three Baudelaires sat together in one of the reading chairs, preferring to be close to one another rather than having more room to sit. And together they opened the enormous book and turned back the pages until they reached the moment in history when their parents arrived on the island and began taking notes. The entries in the book alternated between the handwriting of the Baudelaire father and the handwriting of the Baudelaire mother, and the children could imagine their parents sitting in these same chairs reading out loud what they had written and suggesting things to add to the register of crimes, follies, and misfortunes of mankind that comprised a series of unfortunate events. The children, of course, would have liked to savor each word their parents had written. The word savor, you probably know here, means read slowly, as each sentence in their parents' handwriting was like a gift from beyond the grave. But as the poison of the Medusoid mycelium advanced further and further, the siblings had to skim, scanning each page for words, horseradish or wasabi. As you know, if you've ever skimmed a book, you end up getting a strange view of the story, with just glimpses here and there of what's going on. And some authors insert confusing sentences in the middle of a book, just to confuse anyone who might be skimming. Three very short men were carrying a large flat piece of wood painted to look like a living room. As the Baudelaire orphans searched for the secret they hoped they would find, they caught glimpses of other secrets their parents had kept, and as Violet, Klaus, and Sunny spotted the names of people the Baudelaire parents had known, things they had whispered to these people, the codes hidden in the whispers, and many other intriguing details, the children hoped they would have the opportunity to reread a series of unfortunate events on a less frantic occasion. On that afternoon, however, they read faster and faster, looking desperately for the one secret that might save them as the hour began to pass and the Medusoid mycelium grew faster and faster inside them. As if the deadly fungus also did not have time to savor its treacherous path. As they read more and more, it grew harder and harder for the Baudelaires to breathe, and when Klaus finally spotted one of the words he had been looking for, he thought for a moment it was just a vision brought on by all the stalks and caps growing inside him. Horseradish, he said, his voice rough and wheezy. Look! Ishmael's fear-mongering has stopped work on the passageway, even though we have a plethora of horseradish in case of any emergency. Violet started to speak, but then choked on the fungus and coughed for a long while. What does fear-mongering mean? She said finally. Plethora! Sunny's voice was little more than a mushroom-choked whisper. Fear-mongering means making people afraid, said Klaus, whose vocabulary was unaffected by the poison. And plethora means more than enough. He gave a large, shuddering wheeze and continued to read. We're attempting a botanical hybrid through the tuberous canopy, which should bring safety to fruition, despite its dangers to our associates in utero. Of course, in case we are banished, Beatrice is hidden a small amount in The middle Baudelaire interrupted himself with a cough that was so violent he dropped the book to the floor. His sister held him tightly as his body shook against the poison, and one pale hand pointed at the ceiling. Tuberous canopy, he wheezed finally. Our father means the roots above our heads. A botanical hybrid is a plant made from the combination of two other plants. He shuddered, and his eyes behind his glasses filled with tears. I don't know what he's talking about, he said finally. Violet looked at the roots over their heads, where the periscope disappeared into the network of the tree. To her horror, she found that her vision was becoming blurry, as if the fungus was growing over her eyes. It sounds like they put the horseradish into the roots of the plant in order to make everyone safe, she said. That's what bringing safety to fruition would be, the way a tree brings in its crop to fruition. Apples, Sunny cried Sunny in a strangled voice. Bitter apples. Of course, Klaus said. The tree is a hybrid, and its apples are bitter because they contain horseradish. If we eat an apple, Violet said, the fungus will be diluted. Gentrified, Sunny agreed in a croak and lowered herself off her sibling's laps, wheezing desperately as she tried to get to the gap in the roots. Klaus tried to follow her, but when he stood up, the poison made him so dizzy that he had to sit back down and clasp his throbbing head. Violet coughed painfully and gripped her brother's arm. Come on, she said in a frantic wheeze. Klaus shook his head. I'm not sure we can make it, he said. Sunny reached towards the gap in the roots and then curled to the floor in pain. It, she asked, her voice weak and faint. We can't die here, Violet said, her voice so feeble her siblings could scarcely hear her. Our parents saved us. They saved our lives in this very room. Maybe not. Without even knowing it. Maybe not, Klaus said. Maybe this is the end of our story. Tumor chap, Sunny said. But before anyone could ask what she meant, the children heard another sound, faint and strange, in the secret space between the apple trees. Their parents had hybridized with horseradish long ago. The sound was sibilant, a word which might appear to have something to do with siblings, but actually refers to a sort of whistle or hiss, such as a stern engine might make as it comes to a stop, or an audience might make after sitting through one of A.L. Fooncout's plays. The Baudelaires were so desperate and frightened that for a moment they thought it might be the sound of the medusoid mycelium celebrating its poisonous triumph over the three children, or perhaps just the sound of their hopes evaporating. But the sibilance was not the sound of evaporating hope, or celebrating fungus, and thank goodness it was not the sound of a steam engine or a disgruntled theater audience, as the Baudelaires were not strong enough to confront such things. The hissing sound came from one of the few inhabitants of the island whose story contained not one but two shipwrecks, and perhaps because of its own sad history, this inhabitant was sympathetic to the sad history of the Baudelaires. Although it is difficult to say how much sympathy can be felt by an animal, no matter how friendly, I do not have the courage to do much research on this matter, and my only herpetological comrade's story ended quite some time ago. So what this reptile was thinking as it slid towards the children is a detail of the Baudelaire history that may never be revealed. But even with this missing detail, it is quite clear what happened. The snake slithered through the gap in the roots of the tree, and whatever the serpent was thinking, it was quite clear from the sibilant sound that came hissing through the reptile's clenched teeth that the incredibly deadly viper was offering the Baudelaire orphans an apple. Okay. We will continue with chapter 13 and then 14 very soon.